This is Old Mountain Media.
Something Cryptid This Way Comes is a production of Old Mountain Media. The expressed opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Pacific Northwest Sasquatch Shadows, Old Mountain Media, or Something Cryptid This Way Comes. Welcome to a special episode of Something Cryptid This Way Comes, the interviews. This will wrap up the first season of stories, interviews, and the like. We hope to bring you more, but for now, head on over to the new show brought to you by Old Mountain Media, Legends and Tales of the Pacific Northwest. It's everything your history teacher forgot to tell you. Ghost towns, serial killers, race wars, union strikes, inventions, Native American legends, and even Bigfoot. Today, I'm honored to welcome SunBow TrueBrother, a member of the Cree First Nations from Saskatchewan, Canada. SunBow will talk about his journey as a medium to the elder of a Sasquatch tribe known as Elder Camus. Based on his findings and experience, SunBow will relate Camus' message to humanity. You can find his books on Amazon. They are quite interesting and raise many questions with points for endless open discussion. You might also want to check out the 3 films entitled Sasquatch Speaks, available on Amazon Video. It's quite an interesting phenomenon, not often discussed in the Bigfoot community. And now, SunBow TrueBrother. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's my honor to introduce you to SunBow TrueBrother. SunBow is an author, networker, international speaker, and shamanistic practitioner with 4 decades of experience in shamanistic journeys and teachings in 20 countries. He has learned and worked with Indigenous elders from dozens of nations of the Americas and last year of Australia. These teachings and experience have led him to connect with the guidance of interdimensional guides such as ancestors and animal spirits such as the Sasquatch and Star Elders. SunBow is sought after in many conferences to be a speaker, one being here in Washington State, not too far from me, at the annual Psychic Sasquatch event near the town of Chewelah. SunBow has had and continues to have communication with the Sasquatch Elder Camus, and his objectives are to facilitate a peaceful and spiritual approach to interspecies communications and relations, to promote non-violent spiritual ways to contact non-human intelligence, and especially Sasquatch, and to help people develop connections with Sasquatch, providing information, counseling, and support. He's the author of numerous books, all of which are mentioned in the links, and this is a new approach to the mystique surrounding Sasquatch, and I can't wait to learn so much about this. SunBow, welcome. There's a lot of information and ideas to unpack, and I just kind of want to jump in. Could you start just by introducing us to yourself? Tell us a little bit about how your journey began in this realm of communication with Sasquatch, and then we'll dive a little deeper into that as we go.
Sure. Thank you, Ross, for inviting me. It's been 40 years for me of learning on a shamanic way with several elders and teachers of many tribes. And the last 6 years, I've published 6 books that have addressed different topics. The first 3 are part of a series, The Sasquatch Message to Humanity, which is experiences and channeled messages. The 3rd volume is written by a collaboration of 10 10 international co-authors who have had encounters and communications with the Sasquatch. The next book I wrote was still with their guidance, Hairy Humanoids from the Wild, Encyclopedia of All Things Sasquatch, in which I went into a very deep research and studies of just about all the literature that's been already put out about the hairy humanoids we commonly call Sasquatch around the world, including ancient sacred texts and legends, oral traditions from tribes, and 5,000 years of documented historic reports through Middle Ages and colonial era, and into modern research. And the main names of many of the names of the authors and researchers that have made the Bigfoot literature, and into first-hand and second-hand experiences that I documented from hundreds of people by now, that are usually the best source of information, direct experience with the Sasquatch or similar beings. And so this encyclopedia draws conclusion. It just presents a lot of documentation from hundreds of sources. That there's certain conclusions or that come out of it is confirmed by experience and research, is that the Sasquatch are not a big ape, as many believe, or primitive hominins. They are what most ancient tribes who knew them called them like supernatural or magical beings, spirit beings. They, in other words, we can say they have interdimensional abilities. That's why there's a lot of paranormal phenomena surrounding them, including orbs or spacecrafts or different unexplained phenomena, things that appear and disappear, and also telepathy as a way of main way of communication. So these books are all on my website on the homepage, and the last series I started is entitled Contemporary Shamanic Journeys. It recounts all the last 40 years of my learning and experience and practice in shamanic ways, with different teachings gathered. Each book covers a decade, so there's 2 titles out right now, and I'm working on a third one. So I believe that summarizes pretty much what I'm into.
It's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to get into a little bit of the background, if you don't mind, just kind of how your journey started. Now, it goes back 40 years. Can you recap for us your first experience or encounter or communication?
Sure. It's one I often tell because I'm often asked this question.
Sure.
It started for me, the first close encounter happened 40 years ago in 81, actually. It was 40 years last month. And we went 10 young men to camp out in the woods by Chehalis, the reservation of the Silas people from whom the very name Sasquatch comes. They have Sasquatch as their tribal emblem, and They also hold the Sasquatch Days annual festival. It started in 1938. So it's a place where the Sasquatch is very present, very strongly understood, I would say. And we went there and camped out in the woods, and in the middle of the night, we heard those heavy footfalls coming our way through the brush. And we, before we knew it, our lean-to, the main beam was about 6 inches thick, snapped like a toothpick, and our roof collapsed in our face. We were in the middle of the night, in the middle of the wood, very dark night, heavy rainstorm. We couldn't really figure out what happened, but all of us described the same experience, that we heard someone talking into our head or into our dreams. Others said that we felt it was like a native telling us we had not respected the land. We are stripped some cedars to make our roof and things like that. One of us who was camped outside in his little tent freaked out and told us, we need to go. And we said, what's going on? And he said, you won't believe me, but I saw a big hairy monster come, put down the camp, and disappear like a ghost. So we did not believe that. At that point, with the level of knowledge I had back at 17-year-old. But that was the start of a long process. The same week or so, I did my first vision quest, which is pretty much in many shamanic cultures. It's the very first step to start on a shamanic path, where one, usually young initiates, go out in the wilderness and they fast and pray to get a vision until they meet usually an ally spirit that will start teaching them and guiding them. So to me, there's those two events happened the same week pretty much. That's how I started on a shamanic path, because I had a first vision with a animal spirit. It started me on this journey, and from there I looked for explanations, for teachings that could explain the nature of my experiences, and I couldn't find much of any clear understanding of those phenomena anywhere in all the religions or different sources that I consulted or people I talked with even. So basically until I started to see to connect with native traditions or shamanism, for whom the spirit world is very well present and understood, as well as a paranormal phenomenon.
You had a vision and you met your spirit guide. Was that in a physical form, or was that in just a vision form in your mind? How did that work?
Well, it did happen outside of my mind, because it was October 13th, 81, and there was a full moon and an amazing northern lights that were scarlet in color. It's the only time I saw such red northern lights, very bright. Mm-hmm. The way my first spirit guide came to me is the same way that is described in several accounts in stories, it just appeared in front of me. It was in the shape of a raven. It just appeared, flew 3 times around me, and it disappeared. I saw clearly with my eyes, physical eyes, and heard with my ears the sound of the wings. So it came in somewhat of a physical form, but it appeared and disappeared. So again, it was an interdimensional manifestation that came in and out of our physical plane, just like Sasquatch do often. And I found out later, much later, with a lot of research, that the raven is very often associated with Sasquatch in several native traditions.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
For instance, there's a well-known teaching. It's called the 7 Grandfather Teachings of the Anishinaabe, who are the largest linguistic family on the continent. They have 7 beings representing different teachings or virtues that are taught. For instance, the turtle is truth, the bear is courage, wolf is or eagle is love. I might forget a couple here, but one of them is the Sasquatch, whom they call Misabe or Sabe in their language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's who stands for honesty. And in some tradition, some versions of that same 7th grandfather teaching, sometimes the Sasquatch is replaced by a raven. So that's an example how it's often the two are associated, because raven is also representing magic and paranormal and different things like that.
That kind of leads me to my next question then, because you're talking about how an animal or a spirit animal might be associated with Sasquatch. And does Sasquatch shapeshift? That's something I was really curious about. And does this have anything to do with that?
Definitely, they can. That's a very recurrent theme that we hear from many different teachings, that Sasquatch can shapeshift. That many witnesses have seen it too. They can turn into an animal or a rock or a tree, or simply disappear. And they basically let you see what they want you to see.
Yes. Okay. So I want to let you know that I have a dear friend who is from the Yakima tribe, and he is an elder, and he has had, and I'm sure we're going to dive into this a little bit more, but he's had a number of telepathic communications with Sasquatch. He's had, I think, 10 to 15 sightings over the past 30 years. And he has amazing stories, and I've been able to go out and spend some time in the woods with him. He talks a lot about how Sasquatch, they will present themselves to you by their choice, not by our choice. So the more we go seeking them, sometimes the more difficult it is to locate them. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely they're in charge of the process. And as I often say, to approach them is like approaching some wise elders, some teachers with whom we want to come in a humble way, in a peaceful way, respectful way, with no expectation and no agenda. And this is the attitude that they look for: sincerity, humility, and love, and wanting to learn. And when they see this, they will decide how they contact us. There's many ways they can use. It often starts with many people with dreams or visions, or in meditation you see them, or because it's easier to get used or accustomed to their presence, their energy that is very intense, through a filter like this dream. Then meeting one face to face in the physical at first, which is quite an impressive experience, and it does require, well, for me, it did require 33 years of shamanic training before I was finally ready, after several sightings and encounters, and intensively in the last of those 33 years, I was finally well prepared and ready to say, okay, I'm going to meet you. But it's not a weekend hobby, like you're gonna jump on board, it's okay, let's go watch Sasquatch this weekend.
I've had these discussions with other members of the community, and there's so many different approaches to what Sasquatch are. And the one thing I think that everybody can agree on, is the mysteriousness that surrounds them, regardless of your view or regardless of your experience. And what I find intriguing about your story, SunBow, is your communication, and especially in your the Sasquatch message to humanity. I find it so in depth on not just spirituality, but how we can work with one another. Like it's a message on how we should be. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever felt like you're in a tunnel? The sides are closing in on you. You're unable to escape the overwhelming feelings of unhappiness, anger, worry, or fear. I have, many times. Over the years, I've tried to solve my own problems, lean on myself, and suppress the depression of my past and the anxiety of my future. But then I decided to do something about it. And while I'm still a work in progress, I know that without getting help, those invisible monsters would reach for any opportunity they can to consume me. They still do. But with online therapy, I'm conquering those monsters, and it feels good. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is, therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? Well, it's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work. Maybe you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better. Because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And here's a special offer for Something Cryptid This Way Comes listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/PNW. That's betterhelp.com/PNW. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Now, I know I believe it's from the Cree, you're descendant from the Cree Tribe, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about your background with the Cree Tribe, if this has been part of your journey, or perhaps it hasn't, and how that led to your communication with Camus, the elder of the Sasquatch?
Yeah. Well, I didn't get my teachings from my lineage directly, because my grandfather, who was born in Saskatchewan, was not orphaned pretty young, at 4, I think, and he was raised in the orphanage and residential school that are quite infamous for force assimilating Native children, causing a lot of trauma and abuse to force them to abandon, to renounce to their native identity and culture and language. So my grandfather, we can say in his case, like the official policy stated, it killed the Indian and the child. And he kind of detached all his life from his native background. But when I went to where he was born on my 50th summer, and in northern Saskatchewan around Prince Albert, and I found, quite by chance, the grave of his grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. And also in the old Gazette, there's a report about my great-great-grandfather and his twin brother, who were found in the wilderness of the Northwest Territories in the mid-1800s. And they were around 8-year-old. They were wearing rawhides, eating bugs and roots, and living in a hut of branches. And they didn't speak any human language. So I was very intrigued about that story, and I happened to connect with one of my Cree cousins, who's a family historian. And she was surprised I had found that story. But she said that we have Sasquatch in the family.
Sasquatch in the family?
Yeah. So that my great-great-grandfather was half Sasquatch, and I'm 132nd. That might sound odd for most people, I guess, but it's quite a common occurrence in several native cultures, especially in the Northwest, North America, as well as in Australia or Tibet or different parts of the world where the hairy humanoids actually have somewhat interbred. By what process, which might be complex, but they have somewhat share their genetics with us humans. And we also know that by the certain genetic studies, like the Sasquatch Genome Project, that the Sasquatch have 99% the same DNA than we do. So they are our closest relatives. That's why many tribes call them the elder brothers or elder relatives, because they are like an older version of humanity. But instead of choosing a way of materialism and technology, like we have, making us more and more depending on outside technology and other outside means and tools, they chose to develop their full natural potential, including all the psychic abilities that they have, potentially that we also can have if we learn how to use them. Yeah.
And do you think because of your ancestry tied to the Sasquatch, that makes you more open to be able to communicate the way you have?
It certainly does play, because I've always had some kind of a connection or some kind of a natural affinity, I would say, in believe in with the paranormal to start with, and in with the Sasquatch. Ever since it goes to my childhood, basically, I didn't know anything except what everybody heard, but I felt some kind of natural connection, and it took, like I said, many years before I could understand where it came from, but it kept crossing my path. So that was a process of preparation, and I would say that the genes is not the only thing, or it's not necessary, or it's not enough to have a connection. It's more spiritual practice and psychic development that will make you more susceptible or more more will give you the possibility to develop these contacts if you choose to.
I was watching a documentary called Sasquatch Speaks, which I know you're aware of. I believe that's actually where I learned about you. That happens nearby where I'm at. And what I found intriguing by this, SunBow, is that the people that are at this I don't know if you call it a conference or a get-together, whatever it is, all of their experiences rarely happened in the wilderness. Many of them happened like nighttime, like somebody in her bedroom heard it or saw one, or somebody heard one speak to them when they were shopping, and, just really interesting environments. That makes me want to find out why these certain individuals are able to have this communication. And you kind of were just touching on that, which is why I want to jump to this. How does one communicate telepathically with Sasquatch if that's their goal? For example, if I wanted to have a connection and I wanted to find a Sasquatch that might communicate with me, what would be my step? Or is that even something I should even be seeking? Is that ego that I want to have that communication and it's not up to me?
Sure. Well, it's different for every person. And it depends on many factors, starting with your interest, your openness. Like I said earlier, for many people, it starts with dreams and telepathy because it's easier for us to relate, to communicate that way with them. Like in the movie Sasquatch Speaks, in which I am actually, I could not say what's the percentage of people who had physical encounters, but it's kind of a process that goes both ways, because once you start having signs, physical signs or encounters, it has to go at a certain rhythm. No Sasquatch will come and sit with you the first day and shake your hand. They will watch you. They will see how you're doing, how you behave, how you react. Often you have to. One of the main things is to get over the fear, because just feeling their presence can be overwhelming. They have way superior psychic and physical abilities than we do. So it's like they don't want to frighten us. They want to make friends, which takes time to build mutual trust. The best way to meet them, of course, is if you go out in nature where they would roam, where they would want to live and be. And also you develop your communication with nature, with living beings that are other forms of intelligence. So the great school to learn about either Sasquatch or spirits or paranormal, it's nature. That's where you find your connection, and things can happen without any interference, without anyone spying or disturbing, or traffic passing by. So I always suggest to people, if you're really into it, start by going out in nature, starting to feel at home and comfortable with nature. Don't bring bear spray or guns or any kind of thing that makes basically is motivated by fear. I've been plenty of time with bears and cougars and wolves, and Wolverines and those animals, they're never gonna attack you if you're peaceful and loving, and if you don't have fear. They're gonna attack you if you look for it, basically.
Sure.
So it's the same with Sasquatch. We first have to make peace with nature and with all its our relatives living there to be ready to meet something like Sasquatch. Because it's like another level. Now with Sasquatch, you can, see orbs, or find a tree structure, or find footprints, or any kind of sign that they will give you to show their presence.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, depending on how you react and what's your intention, they will keep adding to it. They will until you are ready to communicate. Actually, the best way to develop communication is to express your intention. When you go out in the woods or something, you take a time. You find a space and take a time to express your intention, your reason for being there, for wanting to meet them. You can give some offerings or some signs of respect and friendship, and listen to what you will pick up. You might hear things in you, not necessarily words, could be images, the feelings, but you will be, if they communicate, you will start feeling it at some point. It could be knocks on the trees, whistles, all kinds of things that will gradually develop connection and communication.
Let me ask you a question that kind of leads out of that. If one were to start seeing signs, such as they see a tree structure that they can't explain, by weather or by another animal, or then they see one or two tracks, and this is starting to become more frequent, is that a sign of that person just being aware more, or is it a sign of possible communication coming soon?
Both, actually, I would say. Of course, if you don't pay attention, you don't notice. Like the tree structures, probably many people have seen them without noticing. When you don't know what to expect or what to look for, it could be just might look like a random pile of branch. If you pay attention and start observing and seeing how it's been built, it's interwoven and intelligently structured, you can start decoding intelligent messages, codes. It's the same with anything. You hear wood knocks or whistles or hoots in the forest, and most people will just not notice or just brush it off. But the more you pay attention, the more it's going to become meaningful. And that's what they're all actually looking for who's going to pay attention, who's going to show interest or any sign of will to communicate. And that's why it's a process. They are patient, and they're actually looking for the right people to communicate with, and it's up to any seeker to follow that path.
Why do you believe that, like when somebody finds a single footprint, a lot of the argument out there, and you've heard this, I know, so many times, well, why is there only one footprint? Or why isn't there that physical evidence? I've heard that the one footprint phenomenon has a lot to do with either one, it's a gift being left for us, or two, it's possibly that Sasquatch is living on a different vibrational plane or a different dimension, steps out of that dimension and leaves that as a gift for us. Is that something you've heard to, or something you can speak to?
Yeah, sure, exactly. I found prints many times, probably dozens of times by now. And most often you see just a few, one maybe, but a few. It could be 2, 3, it could be 20, but just once, as far as I remember, I could see the tracks keep going very far in the snow. Other than that, that's usually what you find. That's what most people will find. It's just a few footprints because there's a lot of information right there. First of all, it's a sign. It's like a signature. That's why they're called Bigfoot, right? Because it's like their energetic signature to leave a big footprints, human-like but bigger. Plus, if they leave just one or a few, it's a message to show that we've been here, but we're not stuck here. We're not. They can manifest in the denser frequency, I guess, and they can just as well transcend into another dimension. So they can come and just like they can come in invisible form. There's a lot of stories that I've had experiences too, where they're right next to you. You hear footsteps. You might even see the footsteps on the ground, but they're invisible to the naked eye. So they're in another type of frequency or density that does not reflect the physical light, so it's invisible to us.
This episode is sponsored by Pride Counseling. We live in a world of mystery, of unanswered questions, of constant bombardment from endless opinions, and mostly from questions within ourselves. I've taken advantage of online therapy and have seen the benefits as a professional, a father, a spouse, and a friend. And without the help from online counseling, I would most likely still be stuck in the ruts of uncertainty and bleakness. We all struggle with our own true nature at one point or another, or we know someone who has. Therapy can be the difference between happiness and overwhelming darkness. Pride Counseling is affordable, private online counseling for the LGBTQIA+ community. You can get access to licensed, trained, fully accredited counselors and therapists that are LGBTQIA+ friendly. These counselors and therapists have at least 3 years of experience, at least 2,000 hours of hands-on experience, and are qualified and certified by their state's professional board. All you need to do is go to pridecounseling.com/PNWpod. Fill out a questionnaire, get matched with a counselor who is perfect for you, and you can start counseling today. It's more affordable than in-person counseling, and if you can't afford counseling, there is financial aid available that you can apply for. You get unlimited 24/7 messaging with your counselor, meaning you're connected with a counselor the entire time via your phone or computer, and you can schedule live video, phone, or text sessions with your counselor as well. With Pride Counseling, you're not wasting time traveling, and if you don't vibe with the therapist you're matched with, you can switch. Best of all, you connect from the comfort of your home. Half the battle of getting into counseling is getting to the counselor, and Pride Counseling eliminates that hassle. Plus, a lot of people in the LGBTQIA+ community are not comfortable talking to a therapist in person out of fear of discrimination, or perhaps they just don't have access to a therapist that specializes in what they're struggling with. With Pride Counseling, you can connect with an LGBTQIA+ counselor from anywhere. And as a special offer to Something Cryptid This Way Comes listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at pridecounseling.com/PNWpod. That's PNWPOD. Again, that link is pridecounseling.com/PNWpod. Thank you to Pride Counseling for sponsoring this podcast. I want to ask about the collective consciousness. Now, you've spoken about that before. And as I'm reading through the Sasquatch message to humanity, I've noticed that there's a theme surrounding that collective consciousness. Is this something that you have experienced yourself, or is it something you can explain to listeners what exactly that means and how that plays in the communication to with Sasquatch?
Yeah, when we communicate in telepathy. It's like a convergence of consciousness. It's like, let's say we connect two computers together and we share the information. The whole data on, let's say, the second hard disk can be downloaded on the first one. Yet it still takes time to process and to read and understand the data for your brain. So that's why we call it information downloads that many channels describe. It's like when you have this deep telepathic communication, basically thoughts can be shared freely. At times, it happens with a collective. If people like, let's say, the Sasquatch Elders, who are used to communicate this way between themselves, or star beings, for instance, they can talk with one mind, let's say. They can like join in a collective consciousness and talk to someone this way. So sometimes the message I received or others come from a collective, from a council, or from a group that are connected on the same vibration frequency.
There's a quotation by Camus I'd like to read real quickly, a sentence. It says, "Once one of you has established contact with the greater soul, we can always communicate in spirit afterwards, regardless of distances, much like we do with your star elders." Can you explain that kind of communication, and what is Camus referring to, talking about the greater soul and the star elders?
Yeah, like every species has its greater soul or collective consciousness, where evolved species like the Sasquatch, we can compare this to the internet somehow. They can all communicate from the distance, regardless of where they are, or they can share information because the speed of thought is faster than the speed of light. To explain in the second book of the Sasquatch Message to Humanity, there's more deeper details about the different dimensions and how they interact. There's planes that are faster than the speed of light. Actually, only our physical plane is slower than the speed of light, so we can see it. But there's 96% or more of the universe that is being perceived and calculated that is non-physical. So that's where paranormal phenomena, interdimensional phenomena take place and can manifest in our physical plane. So telepathy can happen at that level where souls can combine basically their thoughts in a collective consciousness and send a collective message, or even do some collective actions.
So can you tell me exactly what are star elders?
There's all kind of star people.
Okay.
There's as many stars and planets as we can perceive. It's only a small fraction of all there is. And the Fermi paradox or whatever, there's a lot of, it's pretty much now more and more admitted that there has to be some life in the universe somewhere else, and most likely intelligent life. And if we look at the age of our planet, we're not such an old planet, so there's definitely more advanced, more evolved forms of life in the universe and non-human intelligence. These beings can have all kind of different level of consciousness and agendas and there are different karmas that they carry from their history. That there are some that are called Star Elders, because they are spiritual elders. They are more evolved spiritually, and they also are like watchers. They supervise and watch over the creation and development of worlds for the soul evolution of all the life forms therein.
So a lot of people tie Sasquatch to alien to Earth, I should say, life forms. And one of the theories I've heard is that Sasquatch was sent here as a guardian or a lookout for a species from another planet, galaxy, universe, what have you. Is this something you have heard before? And what are your thoughts on that?
The Sasquatch definitely, from what we know from the genetics, also from what they've told us, they were genetically modified, just like us humans. We have a spliced gene which doesn't occur in nature, and there's 265 identified horizontal genes that were introduced in the human genome. So we know we're a melting pot, and that's, we talk about modern humans, but there were other hominins before us that we interbred with. So it's a bit the same with the Sasquatch. They have had but much longer time to evolve as well on different planets. And we get clues with those petrified human-like footprints, bigger than human, that we find around the world, that are dated geologically as far as 200 or 300 million years. So they've been around for very long, much longer than we have, and so they have diversified in different lineages. Possibly different species like the hominins have. But to this day, and that's from many first and second-hand reports, and also from several ancient native stories, they have the Sasquatch have been and have kept in touch with the Star Elders, and they are actually also keepers of the earth, according to like what the Hopi interpret of the Sasquatch. So they are like our elders, where they're watching, they're caretaking the planet, and we as younger brothers, we have been learning, but slowly, and we have been doing a lot of damage to our home planet. So it is normal that the elders, the Sasquatch being our closest relatives, we can say our connection with the Star Elders. They're often their messengers, and they live on this planet, so they can contact us more easily when they deem we're ready. But they definitely have been reaching more and more in past years, or maybe decades. There's been an increasing number of reports, because they are trying to reach out to remind us essential truths about who we are and what's our purpose on this planet, where we are meant as well to be caretakers.
If we haven't been here that long, which you and I both agree, I think most people agree we haven't as a human race, why would Sasquatch, why would Sasquatch care so much? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Why would they care to help or guide if our existence is young and may not exist for that long? What's the point of communicating with us then?
Well, this is basically a sign of spiritual maturity. What do we do in life? We evolve, we learn until we become wiser, more loving, more caring. If we do follow a good path. And what do we do when we become elders? We care. We care for the younger ones. We want to teach them. We want to help them in their way because we've been on the path before them. So that's the same principle. The Star Elders, the more beings evolve, I would say spiritually, because you can be super high-tech robots if you have no heart. It's not that evolved. But if you have a soul and you have, because we do, and you develop the highest aspect of life, of existence, that will lead necessarily to psychic and paranormal understanding. And then what do you do with this knowledge and this power? You basically want to use them in service to help others to grow, learn, heal.
If it goes beyond just taking care of the earth, if it goes to taking care of each other, I often wonder what Sasquatch would think of the human race. And I think many people do, as they watch us and what we do, and the wars that we're in, and the technology that we're developing, and the lack of stewardship of the earth that as a massive whole we seem to be neglecting. Do you think that is also a message that Sasquatch has for us? And on top of that, what do you think Sasquatch's wish for the human race is?
That's a very essential part of the message, to remind us to be caretakers and to remember our soul, to feel empathy for all life. So by feeling empathy, we become caretakers. We don't want to cause harm, knowing that everything is interrelated, and the more harm we cause on our planet, the more we'll suffer. Also, the greatest resource on any planet, because it could be mineral. I mean, people would believe it's minerals or water or wood or even biodiversity, gene pools. All these things are highly precious because it took a lot of time and evolution to develop, and a lot of care. But the greatest of all resources is spiritually conscious, intelligent souls. So that's why when, for instance, some groups or species or whatever, some factions want to control a planet or even a country, we can put at the human scale. The best way is to control the souls, to control the thoughts, the minds. If you can induce fear and all kind of control measures in people's mind, you can control the planet. And that's why we've been warned against this, to remember our own soul, our own consciousness, and to be aware of there's also a dark agenda. So that's why we are in such a mess, we can see, in this actual situation on the planet.
I want to tell you a little bit about my journey very quickly here, SunBow, because this is more about you and your experience, but I'm looking for some feedback. So when I was a child, up on, I don't know if you know the Pacific Northwest area, but in Washington State, we have an area called the San Juan Islands, which is between the Olympic Peninsula and the rest of the main state, where Seattle and Everett and all the big cities are. And on those islands, we have a lot of folktale, paranormal stories. But my grandmother had a house on an island overlooking the San Juan Islands. And when I was a child, I would go into the dark woods and I would be by myself. And during those times, I remember, and this is quite a while ago, I remember having this sense of not being alone, of having this connection with nature that I thought was unnatural and felt a little odd. Now, I know that some people just have a connection with nature. And if you look at native cultures, the connection to nature is extremely important. And as you say, also with Sasquatch. I'm wondering if those types of instances, we hear that from a lot of children where they go out into the woods and they feel like they're not alone. Do you think sometimes that could be partly Sasquatch in the vicinity or that kind of thing? I guess it's hard to generalize experiences. Everybody has their own. But I'm wondering if that has a little bit to do with it.
Absolutely. There's been, that's a very common described first contact, I would say, when people feel they're in the woods and they feel they're observed and they feel another consciousness watching them. And of course, it's not always Sasquatch. It can be an animal. It can be nature spirits or but ancestors, whatever. But there's this gift, this faculty that the Sasquatch have. They have demonstrated, taught me, is what they call permeating consciousness. And basically, on a non-linear time scale, consciousness can manifest everywhere. In other words, in quantum physics, says the consciousness is the first and main condition for any existence. So that's the first manifestation of existence is consciousness. Another way to look at it is a great elder of mine said often that everything is spirit. It's all spirit. So when you look at life this way, you see everywhere is consciousness. Everything, every little twig and flower, every breeze, every little wave on a lake is alive. It's a message that comes to us. And that reminded me once I was on a vision quest and I was praying for a message. I wanted to hear Great Spirit talk to me, and it took 10 days before I heard one word. It said, listen. And I started to listen and I realized that Spirit was talking to me all the time if I listened. Every little breeze and twig and bird singing is a voice of consciousness, is a voice of spirit. So that can happen on different levels, but that's one particularity that the Sasquatch can do is project their consciousness into the environment. And in that way, they can appear, either in a rock or a tree or a cloud, or they can appear at just about anywhere they want to manifest their consciousness.
When you heard the first time there was a communication, I think on everybody's mind would be, what does it sound like? Do you actually hear a voice? What does a voice sound like? Is it thoughts or visions rather than a voice? What do you hear?
Honestly, it's rarely words. It happened like the story I just told you, after 10 days I heard one word, listen. And that's probably when I started hearing, but without words. It's more like thoughts, thought forms that, or like I would say, information download that you're given a file to process, and the whole story is there, and it's up to you to read it completely or in part, or skip some parts, or keep it for yourself or express it. It's pretty much, you can do what you want with the information, but it's usually given for a reason. And when you, for me, when I started being taught directly from them, I asked a few questions at first. Well, first, I wanted to make peace and make sure who I was talking with. He was sitting behind my tent, but then once peace is there and you feel no threat, you feel totally friendly, wise energy, and you can feel confident to dive into the conversation. Well, that's when the information comes, and they ask me to put it in words in those books, because information is always present beyond linear time. It's always like if you have a whole file on a computer disk, but then when you're ready, you can watch that movie or you can read that text. So it's a bit what happens with the way we access information and process it. And it depends how open and how, I would say, somehow dedicated to this exercise, that we will get whatever is meant for us.
So 2015 comes around and you are in British Columbia, Canada, and you're out camping. As you've just mentioned, you heard, or there was Sasquatch presented themselves to you sitting behind your tent. And that is when you started to have this connection, I believe. I mean, you've had this connection, but where the message to humanity, I guess, manifested itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? And how did you know that you were supposed to transcribe or write these books?
Sure. At first, like I said, I had several encounters over the years. It were just all lessons for me to start to figure out what I was dealing with. What are the Sasquatch people to start with, as well as, star beings that are involved. But it was all bits and pieces until I discovered I'm part Sasquatch, and I started to really get into deeper research and study, and found out that about 95% of what you find online is not reliable. You have to go to first-hand experiencers or native cultures who have interacted with them for generations to find some factual information, even if it's not conventional. And you realize that the big ape theories and all that is just pure speculation with no foundation at all. However, I had the last, from 2014 to 2015, I had ongoing encounters and phenomena, which were basically training me to get used to it, to prepare. I had them walk on my roof a few times, walk around my camp, look at me through the window, and things kept happening to really make me accustomed to their presence. Even if I was not sure what was going on, I was doubting, and I had even clear sighting close to me, and I was still doubting. So it went on for months and months until I realized, well, okay, they want to contact me and I want to contact them. And since I had, in 2003, I had a very clear sighting with a friend on Vancouver Island, I decided to return there because it's Vancouver Island has the largest concentration of reports, and it's very present in the native cultures there. So it's pretty much a Sasquatch country.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to randomly picked wild lake called Kennedy Lake, Big Lake. And that's when it started. The first day I found footprints, were my first ones, and then I walked around for days and days, and after a week I did ceremonies with drums and flutes and chants and and sending a call, and that's the night when Camus came. When he came, well, I first heard him come knock on trees and shake and break trees, and his footsteps coming my way until he sat just behind my tent. And that's when the conversation started. I had no doubt left at all that this was really happening. Plus, it was then or never, so I first greeted him and said I came in peace to learn about them, and he started right away to greet me and teach me about who they are and how connected, how interrelated we are, including with star beings. And so that first conversation lasted not very long in time, some minutes. I couldn't say exactly how many minutes, but I had already a hole full of information download to process. And the next day, that's when I started having almost daily confirmations, when the next day I was asking for a sign, and then a whirlwind came and turned around me, and I heard a whisper in my ear. And then the following day on my way out, I was calling back and forth with a female Sasquatch. Then that's when I started realizing, okay, well, it's really happening. I'm on this journey, which is kind of unusual, that a lot of people will think I'm crazy or lying or whatever, which made me kind of hesitate, like, I'm going to have to keep this for myself. But they told me there's things we would like you to share on our behalf. And that's the Sasquatch message to humanity. And to confirm this, 1 week later, out of all places, I was invited at the International Indigenous Leadership Gathering in Lillooet, BC. And I got there earlier and was hosted by the chief and his wife, and spent a few days with them before everybody arrived, and shared about my experience. And before I knew it, I realized that especially those cultures out there, the Tlahtliung, Salish, Coast Salish people and all those tribes, they have very, very strong Sasquatch traditions and connections still to this day. You can speak about Sasquatch at the general store and people have stories. It's not like you're not looked at as if you're weird or what. If you speak with the elders, they have knowledge. Many have first-hand experience or second-hand stories, and they understand who those beings are. So when you say this kind of stories we're sharing now, it fits right in with what they know.
When you meet elders and you have in the past and you talk a lot to them about this, do you tell them that you are part Sasquatch? And if so, what is their response to that?
I have shared that in a few medicine circles.
Okay.
I also, I was given hair from Camus and hot herbs that I was getting ready the day before I was going to do the opening ceremony of our first Sasquatch spiritual gathering conference in Chihuahua. And there was a very nice big piece of hair that I shared with a few people, but then I ended up tying the rest around my ceremonial pipe. And I have shared this pipe in several native circles with elders, and everyone has a great respect for Sasquatch medicine. They don't question it, or they don't ask for proof or think you're crazy or anything. So that's a common knowledge in certain medicine circles. But if you want to ask those people, I've asked a few, and at first they don't have nothing to say. They say, "Oh, we got stories, but we don't speak." If they see you have experience or knowledge, or you're really open to learn, well, then they will start telling their own stories.
Amazing. So it sounds to me like it becomes this circle of trust where there has to be a mutual understanding of respect. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Because the Sasquatch has been so much ridiculed, taboo.
Well, and that's, I know I've asked you so many questions for specific answers, and I haven't meant to do that, but you're a wealth of knowledge. And so, I want to ask one more specific question, then I want to have a little more of a back and forth, but on everyone's mind, people that have not seen one, or maybe they've seen a silhouette, what do they look like? When you have had these sightings, can you describe? I'm more interested in their face, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Since they are interdimensional, they will let every individual perceive, see, or hear exactly what that individual is meant to, which often happens as well with spaceships. For instance, there might be few people having the same sighting, but some see, some don't, some see half of it or not so clearly as others. That's a very interdimensional way of communication. It's the same with the Sasquatch when they show up. The clearest images of their faces I've seen is when we're in a deep telepathic conversation, where I get to see their faces pretty much like I'm talking to someone. Otherwise, they have a tendency very often more often I've seen their bodies without clearly seeing their facial traits.
Okay.
And they have, like we said, they can shapeshift, so they can manifest. Individuals have a certain appearance, but next time you might have an animal come next to you, or a whirlwind, or any other way they will choose to manifest.
And that could be Sasquatch.
Yeah, usually can feel or know the connection when it happens.
So yes. So that was my next question. If you feel that, you have to kind of feel that connection to know the possibility that perhaps this is Sasquatch revealing himself in another form, rather than somebody goes out and says, oh, there's Sasquatch, oh, there's Sasquatch, there it is, because I could see some people that are fanatics, everything they look at, they assume is Sasquatch.
Yeah, well, that there's still Pareto. It's very tricky with photos, for instance, or footage, because sometimes someone sees something very clearly and the next person doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's why I've had them show up in some photos or videos or recordings, and it's basically for my personal archives, if you want.
Yes.
I had a lot of people who showed me some amazing photos, but they want to keep it private because they're not trying to prove anything or to have their name out there. Mm-hmm. It's just like a sign that for them they had a nice sign and like a confirmation.
So what is your perspective on the hunters that go out and they do their TV shows and everybody has a different experience and they have different motivations, and I'm wondering, what do you think about that type of pursuit of Sasquatch? Well,
first of all, it's quite unsuccessful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not efficient, it's not working, because you go after anyone with guns, even cameras, if it's like for fame and money and everything. You try to stalk them and chase them into their home. They won't be interested into meeting you. first of all, they're telepathic. They can sense you coming miles and miles before you even think of coming. So as we see, those guys keep chasing footprints and stuff like that all their lives, and they don't get any connection with Sasquatch. If you want a real connection with Sasquatch, you have to go on with their terms. They decide where and when or how they're gonna communicate. Plus, they have to know to see your intention is good. You don't come there to use them, or you come there to learn, to know the real deal, which very often, in general, it's not gonna make you rich or famous or even popular.
Right, and ridicule may come after it. Another friend of mine, who I don't know if you've had the chance to go listen, or I would go watch if you could on the YouTube channel. He is from the drawings of Bigfoot, and he works with eyewitnesses who don't want to come forward. They want to keep it private. And he does sketch. He's this incredible sketch artist, and he listens for hours and hours, and he works with them to come up with this. And his sketches, he will share them sometimes, but he will never sell them, because he knows this is not about making money off of this. This is about sharing and spreading awareness. And more importantly, what he and I have discussed, and we're going to keep discussing, is the healing process. As you said, a lot of people go out and they experience fear, and they see something and fear overwhelms them. So he's been able to kind of push that fear into another channel, if you will, because they're able to get out and explain what they have seen. And I think this is a really powerful thing. And I think, like you were just saying, if you're going out, in my personal opinion, if you're going out with tons of cameras, you're going out with sound recording, you're going out and you're going to find yourself a Bigfoot. I don't know how successful that really could be, because it seems like if what you're saying is that it's more about their willingness to be seen, then that's up to them and not to us. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. There could be, like you mentioned, drawings. Drawings can be another way of channeling them.
Okay.
In my encyclopedia, there's 10 great Sasquatch artists who contributed with their drawings, and some of them have said they basically, that's how they communicate with them. They join in their consciousness and they see the image.
That is powerful.
Yeah. So that's it's more like a soul to soul connection we're looking for than mind over, like okay, I'm the guy who proved anything, or it's just like this knowledge has always been there. It's not something that we come up with. We just gotta dig into ancient tribal knowledge, and it's always been there.
Well, and now it's gone mainstream because of the recording in 1967, the Patterson Gimlin film, and whether people feel that's real or not, it's become more mainstream. And in my state, you've been to, I don't know if you've been to Washington, but it literally, Vancouver's I grew up near Vancouver. And so here, this has become a real identity of the state, is Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Everywhere you go is Sasquatch. One of our big coffee chains is Bigfoot Java. I mean, it's just, it's a big deal here. But like you said, there are the skeptics, but I have met so many people when you go into small towns, and I spend time in the Gifford Pinchot Forest, which is near Mount St. Helens. And anytime you go into a store or a shop in the little towns of Cougar or Tullett, you talk to people and you mention Bigfoot. And like you said, it's just a matter of fact thing. People aren't going to sit there and make fun of you. They're like, oh yeah, okay, there you go. And I find that almost to be telling in itself of evidence, that it's more of an accepted thing. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Washington has the largest amount of reports in the US, and BC, which is just next door, as also areas like that, like I was mentioning earlier, some West Coast reservations or the Slocan Valley where I used to live, where you basically can talk about Sasquatch just about anywhere, and you will meet people who have either experience or interest.
Are you still in current conversation / communication with Sasquatch?
It's not always the same intensity, but once you have a telepathic connection, it can be anywhere, anytime. They will not manifest as intensively depending on what I'm up to. When I was channeling the books, they were pretty much manifesting continuously every day to keep me focused on that. And now also comes a time when you don't need any more proof or confirmation because you've had enough, you've seen a lot, and after a while, what's the most important is this spiritual connection that you can keep and always develop beyond space or time limitations.
SunBow, I could talk to you for hours. I know we're probably coming to a close here. Before we do, I want to read a quote from your first book, and it's the first volume, The Sasquatch Message to Humanity, Conversations with Elder Camus. And just so everybody knows, this is available on Amazon and books, and I will be posting links all over the place so people can go check out your work. But the quotation I wanted to read is, obviously this is transcribed from Camus himself or herself. I'm sorry. Is it himself or herself? Or their selves? I don't know. It was a him. Okay. All right. So let me read this quotation, then I'd like to hear your take on this. The communication between my people and yours got almost completely lost in the last few of your generations. We are now known mainly through legends, often depicting the worst parts of our history and behaviors. Most of your people stop believing in our existence, and we are usually met by fear from the ones who learn about us. Because of this separation, we have been forced to stay away from your people and must often play the card of frightening away unwelcomed intruders who are not ready to communicate with us for our own safety and survival. And that leads me to ask the question, because everybody says, you hear these stories of bluff charges, or people go out and they get chased. In Florida, they talk about the skunk ape, which more often than not has a ferocious temper, and you hear all these stories. And just like humans, I think we have good humans, we have bad humans, we have powerful, we have meek. I would assume that that's the way it is in Sasquatch as well. When you hear that talking about hiding because of the damage done, what do you believe Camus was getting at more specifically in that little quote?
It expresses how communication, first of all, it's not given to all. There's, even in the tribes, there were medicine people who would communicate with Sasquatch. Most people would stay away or avoid them. And then I've had experiences where a Sasquatch walked right through a campground with about 150 people, and everybody freaked out and ran into their campers, turned off the light, blocked the doors. And I was happy and could communicate with the Sasquatch because I had experience. But that made me realize that out of those 150 people, probably most will even deny or brush off this experience from their mind. So the communication, there's times where the Sasquatch too have to protect themselves. There were several hunting parties that were put up since recorded history, basically, and into modern time. Several powers, secret services from Russia, China, England, United States, and Canada, I guess, were involved into hunting the hairy humanoids. And although it was done covertly, it's documented. So there's cases I have known personally, like Sasquatch Lake in the Slocan Valley, BC, where they had to ward off some invaders coming with guns to track them. When you hear a lot of stories of rocks or logs being thrown near the invaders or hunters, but not hurting them, not hitting them. So that's a sign, like a repellent to impress and to frighten away whatever threat comes their way. Sometimes they might be protecting burial grounds or their homes or their children.
Last question for you, SunBow, and I have to ask this because it's one of the hot topics in those that are seeking hard physical evidence. Why do you believe that we have not, as the human species, been able to locate a deceased body, Sasquatch remains? Why don't we have that yet?
The simple answer is cover up.
Okay.
Because there is, since thousands of years, probably 5,000 years, that I put in my encyclopedia several documented cases where hairy humanoids were captured or killed into modern times. Some were sent to universities, and they were, there's more cases than I can recall now, but even when they did some hunts, they came up. It's probably very, very hard to catch a Sasquatch, but they're not immortal. They can be killed. They probably see you coming. They feel people coming ahead. So unless you surprise them while they're asleep or something like that, there's, like we hear in the native stories, there's cases even in native stories where Sasquatch were attacked or even killed. So there's been bodies. There's been plenty of bodies that, where are they? Well, some must know. Like if we ask the Smithsonian, or why is there 4 million skeletons at the Smithsonian, including 18,000 giants? And why are there so many types of non-human humanoid skulls found around the world, including horned and elongated? And so it's the simple answer is cover up. Is that some powers don't want us to access this knowledge and to want, because it's above their control. They can't control Sasquatch, so they'd rather make us believe that it's not existing.
Do you think that spans to the UFO conspiracy, or maybe not conspiracy, the proof of UFOs as well? I guess we have a new name for it, UPNs.
Right.
But do you think this is kind of this in the same realm when it comes to cover up?
Yeah, definitely, because those are things that governments can't control, and they can't really explain, because they would have to admit that we live in a multiverse where some beings have interdimensional abilities, things that we, with our science, have not quite achieved.
Why would a government want to keep us from knowing this? What's your opinion on that?
It's much easier to control people who, when they believe they are limited to a physical linear time frame reality that is basically a holographic matrix, which composes a very tiny slice of the energy of the universe. But that slice is easier to control. So when they limit our consciousness through education, through propaganda and all that means to this little slice of physical world, we forget about all the other possibilities and existence, and other levels of existence that we also are part of.
Fascinating. Well, SunBow, I can't thank you enough for today, and I really appreciate your perspective. I'm hoping that listeners will comment and leave comments. I'm going to put the audio up on YouTube, but we'll also have this available anywhere you get your podcasts. If anybody wants to learn more about you and your journey, where can they find that information and the books?
My website is scenicsasquatch.com. Scenic, SCENIC, means Sasquatch Close Encounter Network for Interspecies Communications. And on there you have the homepage. There's links to my 6 books and groups and pages I manage.
This is absolutely fascinating. And regardless of what somebody's opinion is on the different approaches to Sasquatch, I hope that people listen with at least maybe not an open mind, well, sure, with an open mind, but also the willingness to go explore something. I think you might agree with me here, SunBow. I think people don't learn because it's scary and you're full of fear when you have to accept that you might not have all the answers. That's a scary thing for many people. And I think a lot of the time people will shy away from topics that make them feel uncomfortable out of fear, and they're just a little worried about it or trepidatious. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your own perspective, to go learn more about SunBow and his mission to bring communication out there. I am absolutely fascinated, and like I said at the beginning, I'm truly honored that you would come on the show and talk to me today. That really means a lot to me.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, SunBow. We'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to Something Cryptid This Way Comes, the interviews. If this has not changed your thoughts, you may want to check your pulse. Whether you believe, agree, or disagree with any of SunBow's experiences or theories, I hope it has raised your brow, causing you to consider that you may not have all the answers and that mysteries of this universe are worth embracing just as they are. Mysteries. If you'd like to dive deeper into SunBow's experience, what he has learned and transcribed, and learn more about his unique approach to life in general, please explore his writings. Links are in the notes. You can also visit him on Facebook at the name SunBow, that's one word, TrueBrother, also one word, and visit SunBow online at scenicsasquatch.com. That's SCENIC Sasquatch.com. Don't forget to visit our sponsors, and don't forget to subscribe and enjoy our new show, Legends and Tales of the Pacific Northwest. Follow along on Instagram at Pacific Northwest Podcast. See you next season.